So I don't think I can stress enough how excited I've been for this episode because it is with my favorite college professor. Yes, I can say that. It's been probably a decade since he's been my professor, but it was by far my favorite class in college. It was ethics. That's how the class was called. He is a philosophy professor, and I took his ethics class, and it was one of those classes, and he was one of those professors that just stick with you for all of the right reasons. You know, I don't know if any of you have been impacted negatively or positively by a teacher in your life, but this was definitely one of those really positive impacts. And yeah, so I've carried what I learned in that class all these years later. I think that's where I wouldn't say my drive, but it really solidified a lot of the reasons I'm an activist today. It gave me a more clear concept of why having a moral compass is extremely important in decision making, whether that's in your daily life or on a broader scale, you know, like what you do in relation to others, to the world, to society, to your children. And I also took Ethics Bowl. Fun fact, he was our Ethics Bowl coach. So we learned to, we were presented with a scenario, you know, a case study, if you will, and we had to argue for or against the scenario with a moral theory that we had learned in his class. It was a fun exercise to, you know, be quick and argue for or against, whether you were actually personally for or against a topic. You kind of have to play the devil's advocate at times, which makes you, you know, put yourself into other people's shoes. It forces you to do that, where you can stop and think, okay, even if I'm not in agreement personally, what would someone in agreement with this, you know, scenario say or do, or why would they think this way, or why would they think that way? And that inherently makes someone, I think, more empathetic, right? Because you are automatically putting yourself in someone's shoes. One of my favorite books in high school was To Kill a Mockingbird, and I think Atticus, you know, says that. That's the only real way to understand people, is trying on their shoes, right? And obviously it's a metaphor. You can't actually do that. You don't really know what other people live day in and day out, but you can try, and that effort can come from a genuine place of caring about other people. Yeah, you know, I call Dr. McQuillan by this formal name. This is the first time in this episode that I will call him by his first name, Colin, and he is now a father as well. So we sort of share a similar path right now as parents to small children. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys his bio, but I could probably blab on about how great of a professor he is and how much I love taking his class and how I wish I could take another one of his classes. So yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys a little more about him formally. His name is J. Colin McQuillan. He is a professor of philosophy and chair of the philosophy department at St. Mary's University. He was raised in Valparaiso, Indiana, and received his BA in history and philosophy from Loyola University, Chicago, his master's in philosophy from Boston College, and his Ph.D. in philosophy from Emory University. He is the editor of 3 books, the author of 2 more, and has published more than 50 chapters in edited volumes, journal articles, and book reviews. Colin is also a father, a runner, and a self-described nerd. We love an ethical nerd. I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. Before we get into the episode, let's talk about traveling with young children. If you're traveling with little ones, you already know what a journey that can be. As a baseball family, we travel a lot. Regular season, off season, you name it. And guess what? That also means we get sick a lot. If the kids get sick, I get sick. If I get sick, they get sick. You know exactly how that cycle goes. And when you're constantly on the go, squeezing in a doctor's visit or waiting in line at the pharmacy is just not realistic. That's why I have to put you onto my latest lifesaver. TeleRx. It's an online pharmacy platform that delivers prescription medication straight to your door. They offer 24/7 pharmacist support and next-day deliveries for orders placed before 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You don't need insurance, and you don't even need an existing prescription. For just $22 doctor fee per order, you can quickly get the prescriptions and medications you need, so you can come back to that never-ending parenting to-do list. Use code Katia15 for 15% off on your first order at telerx.com. You can thank me later. And now back to the episode. Hi everyone. This is easily one of the most exciting episodes for me because I have I haven't ever called you by your first name. I don't know if you realize that. I still know you as Dr. McQuillan. Is it okay, a decade post being your student, to call you Colin?
Please do. In fact, when I started teaching at St. Mary's, I tried to get students to call me Colin, and they refused.
Oof, no.
They kept calling me Dr. McQuillan or Professor McQuillan. I think the best that I got was Dr. Colin, and that just didn't sound right. So, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
for me, all these years later, you've been Dr. McQuillan in my mind, but today I will call you Colin, and maybe that will be the start of the way I think of you now. But before we get into this conversation that I've been so excited for, I want to start with what's been our new tradition this season, asking our guests who are parents, what is an unapparent truth of parenting that you have learned?
I think one of the things I've learned as a parent is just how unpredictable parenting is. There's so many things that you don't anticipate and so many things you don't really control as a parent. So my daughter is 6. Both of her parents are professors. We love to read. We've kind of made a professional career of it. But for her, not the most interesting thing. She didn't take naturally to school. It was a real struggle. And that was something I didn't anticipate. I thought that my child would be a bit more like me, or like her mom. But she is definitely her own person in ways that we didn't expect. I would say that, I don't think I'm casting aspersions here, but neither Rebecca's mom nor I are particularly fashionable. We're professors. But for our daughter, fashion and beauty are really important. She's developing her own very specific aesthetic sensibility, and that's really important to her. Not something I would have expected from my daughter, who's 6. I thought maybe when she was a teenager, maybe. But no, it happened very early. And, for her own reasons, that I don't necessarily know and I don't have any influence over really. So I think parenting is just unpredictable like that.
Yeah.
My sister also has 4 kids. And one of the words that she uses to talk about parenting is just that children are relentless. And I think that is something that until you're a parent and like the 24/7 experience of parenting, you really can't understand it, or it's very difficult to understand or put yourself in the shoes of a parent and imagine parenting 24/7 and always being on and like your children always being your concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, parenting humbles us in so many ways, right? Ways that we didn't even know we needed to be humbled many times. And what you say about them coming with their own unique set of, skills and personality traits, that's so real, with my first, when people were giving me things, I was like, please just don't give me anything pink. I don't like pink. I don't want my daughter to feel like she was gendered to believe that pink was the color she wanted, all of these things. And her favorite color is pink. There was not enough I could have done to stop that from happening. And she came into this world loving pink. And that's one of the smaller ways that, that they are themselves and there's nothing you can do about it, right? There's also a lot more significant ways that presents itself with children. But, I would say there's still some time for your daughter to, I think, develop maybe a love for reading or, studying. We'll see. You never know.
Yeah, I will say it's one of the interesting things about her experience in school that I just didn't anticipate because it's so natural to me. I've been in it my entire life, or everything I remember from my life. It was, the experience of authority and structure in the classroom and the time. She didn't go to preschool. She went straight into kindergarten from like a daycare. And really the idea that the teacher could tell her where to sit was like personally offensive to her, or that, she had to raise her hand to talk. those are things that really offended her sensibilities. And I joke that my daughter is an anarchist. She just has sort of resentment of authority, like built into her personality. And I think that's partly true. I think that was the major hurdle to enjoying school. And
Mm-hmm.
it's less of an issue. She sort of learned the rhythm. She learned how to operate in the classroom, and she's having more fun with it now. But that was not something I expected to be as much of an
I
issue as
think
it was.
my mom probably can commiserate with you when it comes to me. I challenged authority, but my mom's authority more than anything. Obviously, and she chose to homeschool me, so why did she do that? Well, obviously, I'm a better person because of it, thanks to her. But I mean, wow, it was a challenge, and I'm definitely paying my dues now because I have two daughters who do not like to be told what to do. And so I love that for them for the future, but for my mom's self, it is hard. But I want to get into how you've spent your career, right? Ethical and philosophical frameworks, exploration, right? And so I imagine becoming a parent has given you some real world case studies
Yeah.
that no textbook could prepare you for, because truly nothing can prepare us for parenting, right? So how did becoming a parent reframe or challenge your understanding of ethics? And were there moments that, your academic background gave you insight or failed you?
Yeah, I think especially given my sort of philosophical views, parenting was a real challenge because sort of whatever, by inclination or training, I'm a Kantian, which means I'm a rationalist about morality. I think morality is a matter of principle, and you understand the principles and you apply the principles, and it can get messy. It's hard to apply principles in certain cases, but the challenge is more applying the principles than understanding the principles. But when you have a small child and understanding principles is sort of not what they're wired to do, communicating the reasons why certain things are right or wrong can be really challenging. Children are not like you learn the rules and then you apply the rules. That is just not how they operate psychologically. Philosophically, for me, that was a real challenge. And it made me much more sympathetic to, moral sentimentalism, the idea that ethics has to do with sort of feeling and sensibilities. And I think a lot of times, just sort of psychologically, human beings are predisposed to use kind of emotions and feelings as moral motivators and as sort of a shorthand or quick way into moral principles. And I think that that's something I'm more sympathetic to now as a parent than I was before becoming a parent. Like, I just didn't appreciate the sort of gap between rational principles and human psychology. That I think really is a challenge for everyone to understand the difference between right and wrong, and then to actually do what they think is or what they know to be right.
I mean, and little kids are known to be irrational in many ways. So rational.
Yeah.
And, when you're dealing with children, yeah, it's hard to like get them to understand because we can explain things as simply or as complicated. And, it's for me, it's also a challenge because I'm like, right and wrong. It's not binary, maybe it's not black and white, but you try to simplify it to children, for them to kind of grasp the basic concept and the basic principles, and you don't even know if you're getting through to them, and it's like at what point will they understand it. But for me, some of my concerns is the time we're living in, right? When children and everyone really is being bombarded with conflicting values, from political polarization to algorithmic content, on social media. So how do we help them develop a moral compass, right? What do you believe are the most urgent ethical values that we should be passing on to our children today?
Yeah. One ethical value that I think is really important. And some people might not think of it as an ethical value, but I just think like a concern for truth. I think caring about the truth goes a long way. And it goes a long way ethically too, because you care about the truth about what's right and wrong. And I think that helps to work against the sort of transactional sensibilities that are becoming more common now, I think. And also some of the cynicism that we sort of see in pop culture and political culture, things like that. This idea that nothing matters and you just get away with whatever you can get away with. If you care about truth, if you care about what's really the case, it's harder to disregard your moral obligations or your responsibilities to other people and to just sort of throw people under the bus or use people, manipulate people, exploit people for your own gain. And I think just communicating to children that truth matters and things like the difference between right and wrong or the difference between justice and injustice actually matters. That there are answers to these questions. It's not just a sort of impediment that you have to find your way around, but that you should earnestly and honestly try to figure out what's true, what's real, and what's good, and do that to the best of your ability. Nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be good all the time, all the way, in every situation. People make mistakes. People don't know information that they need to have. Sometimes they act in ways that are out of character because they're just not feeling right that day or something. But, if we judge in the long term, in general, do you care about truth? Do you care about the difference between right and wrong? Do you care about justice? Does injustice bother you? Those are things that I think it's really important to communicate to children. And I think one of the best ways to do that is just to model it. Children will, realize that truth and morality and justice matter if they see that it matters to the people around them.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Obviously, children learn the most by observing and modeling and, by example. And obviously right now I have small children. I mean, you do too. So sometimes I, lay awake just thinking, how am I going to pass and teach these values to my children, right? In what ways am I going to really make it land and resonate to them when it's something that I feel like there's a discourse nowadays where empathy can't be taught, but it absolutely can and should be, right? I think. But obviously I'm no expert, and so how? I'm not a professional. I'm not a teacher, a professor, a professional in the field. Obviously as parents, it's there's no right way to parent, but there's definitely values that I think should be part of even public school education, right? So do you think that ethics should be part of public education, or is that a responsibility on the caregivers?
I mean, I really think ethics is a responsibility of everyone all the time. So I think ethics belongs in private and it belongs in public. It is a matter of, relationships between people and relationships between people and institutions and the world that they live in. I don't really think there's any space where ethics doesn't belong. And as a philosopher, I kind of have a different view of that than a lot of people. And this is something that I've found in the classroom. A lot of students come into the classroom thinking that ethics is just a matter of personal opinion or sometimes even religious belief. They think that ethics is a value and values are different than facts. That's a common way of thinking. There are all kinds of ways in which that kind of thinking about ethics has been incorporated into, say, the sciences. They make a fact-value distinction where they say, we're doing science. We're not talking about values. Values are private. They're personal. You decide what you like or what you don't like or what you should do or what you don't do. But that's different than, our descriptive studies of the way things are in the world. And I think there are reasons to take those kinds of views seriously, but I also think that there are serious problems with attitudes like that or views like that. I think that, if you, take that view to its logical conclusion, you're saying whether slavery or genocide is bad is a matter of personal opinion or religious belief and not a fact of the matter, right? I think philosophers are much more comfortable with the idea that there are facts about values, that there are truths about values, and that they're not just private personal opinions or religious beliefs, and that because these things are true, they belong in public. And I think, saying slavery is wrong or genocide is wrong shouldn't be controversial. It also shouldn't be a matter of opinion. It's not opinion, it's truth. And there are reasons why that's true. And even if people disagree with those reasons, they're just wrong, right? That's the idea. You can be wrong about your values. You can be wrong about what's right and wrong. It's not just your personal truth for you. Obviously, lots of people disagree about what's right and wrong. I think the proper response to that is to have the argument and figure out what the right answer is, not to just sort of say everybody goes to their own corner and does their own thing. And when we disagree more strongly, we poke each other with sticks, right? That's how a lot of people think about moral disagreement. And I think that's really destructive. I think we need to be able to disagree about morality and argue about it and come to a rational conclusion. And I think we need to do that in our personal lives and in public.
Yeah. I think the more we have these conversations in our personal lives, the more it will be brought to, the public light, right? Because again, I think these are conversations that we need to have with our children to some degree, obviously age appropriate conversations, whatever that means to you as a parent. But if you don't have sort of like a moral framework at home to fall back on when you hear these crazy things out in the world, it's like, oh, I've never even heard my parents talk about this, so I'm just going to go with what that person said, kind of thing. Or that's how I see it, where it's like you need to be intentional and take an active role in teaching your children these values and these ethics, right? And so if schools aren't taking on this responsibility, right, us as parents and caregivers should be, but it should be reinforced in schools too, because as you just said, there are some right and wrong values to have. And I think a moral compass we should have a rational agreement to where it's pointing. Obviously, we live in a really polarizing time right now in our nation, particularly with this administration. But there's always going to be things we're going to disagree on. But some things should not be controversial, as you said.
It's everybody can disagree, and they should disagree when they disagree. But we shouldn't be cynical or nihilistic about morality and say there's no such thing as a right answer about whether genocide is wrong. I think that is something where even when people have, outrageous or surprising views and they express them and they are deeply committed to them for whatever reason they might have, we shouldn't say that it's hopeless to argue with people, or it's hopeless to try to establish that there is a truth about this issue. I think that's one of the most dangerous things that's sort of happened in public discourse, is just this idea that everybody has their own truth about the world and about values. And so, I don't think it should be controversial to teach children in kindergarten that sharing is a good thing to do, or to teach people in school that they should treat other people with respect, even if they're different, right? That's not something that it's something where I think we might struggle to demonstrate to people who are resistant that those are the correct values, or that there is truth about those values. Even if we struggle to communicate it, I think we can still be confident that there is a fact of the matter, there is a truth of the matter. And we should, in good faith, try to demonstrate what that is. And I think also embody it in the way we act and the way we live to the extent that we can.
Hey, just popping in to say thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts would mean the world. It helps us so much, and as a bonus, you'll also get a chance to win some exclusive merch like this sweatshirt I'm wearing. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, and how would you, either personally or how would you speak to other parents when talking about how, in what ways, I mean, you obviously said embodied, but how do you go about teaching that justice, fairness, and compassion without this feeling of cynicism or hopelessness, right, to your children and perhaps even your students, since you work with young minds every day? That's one of those things that I feel you have a unique position where, you are teaching young minds, and it's almost like, how do you see all of this injustice and racism in the world and not feel hopeless, right? And kind of teach that to the students that are taking your classes.
So I think the way I do it as a parent is a little bit different than the way I do it as a teacher. So one of the things about teaching in a university is that my students are adults. They are legally adults, and I come into the room with the understanding that these are their own people, right? My students are their own people. They have their own ideas. They think for themselves. They draw their own conclusions. I come into the classroom and I talk about the issues, and for whatever reason, whatever it is about the way that I teach, students know that I care about the things that I'm teaching. That's actually, I have student course evaluations. It's a consistent feature.
I can confirm
evaluations that, students say that I care about the stuff that I'm talking about. And I've also taken the time to learn about it, right? I'm by training, and my research is in 18th century German philosophy. I'm a historian of philosophy, not an ethicist, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've taken the time and made the effort to educate myself about the things that I teach because it's important. And I also think it's important to talk with young people, with students about these issues, and to convey a sense of urgency that these things matter and the right answer matters, and that, we're not just going to let ourselves off easy and, shrug our shoulders and say, well, not my problem, or it doesn't affect me, or something like that, because the question is not whether it affects you, it's whether it's right or wrong. And that's an important question in itself. And, with students, I try to convey the complexity of moral problems. I teach moral theories, and there are a bunch of them. And the reason I teach a bunch of them is that they are good in different ways to different degrees. There is no one perfect theory, no one moral theory to rule them all, despite the efforts of some philosophers. You're struggling with what it is that makes something good or bad or right or wrong. And you're doing that earnestly with urgency because you recognize the importance of the issue. And I think that is a good approach in the classroom with adults. With children, I think my daughter would tell you that I really care about what's right and wrong, and that I have a sense of urgency about it. But I think it's less about debating the issues and more about modeling and showing that it's important in the way that I act, and also being self-conscious about the way that I behave. One of the funny things that happened with my daughter is, if she's in the back seat in the car seat, this was a couple of years ago, and we're driving, and I'm frustrated with some other drivers, and I'm, venting kind of under my breath about, other drivers, and my daughter is, talking to me from the back seat and telling me that I should be more patient. And it's true. And one of the things that I try to do with her is to say, you're right. Like, I really need to be more patient. I should practice what I preach. I say that you should be patient. I say that, like, and I accept when I need to be more patient too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk about humbling us yet again. I have had those moments with my children as well. My oldest, particularly, who's the one who's fully vocal, and boy, is she vocal in both languages, English and Spanish. So
Yeah.
she will correct me any day she needs to, and I take it because you're right, and I'm glad that I have modeled it to some extent to where you recognize that I was not acting at my best. Which is important. Children are like our mirrors, and they are our teachers as well, if we let them. And yeah, everything you said, it all just rings so true to me. Obviously, it's hard for me to comprehend how anyone could disagree, but we know they do. But I want to talk now about how you, as a father and philosopher, I want to hear how your perspectives on traditional gender roles in parenting are shifting, and what you think perhaps still needs to change. I don't know if you think that maybe there's an emotional labor on men that they're maybe unprepared for in fatherhood, or anything else.
Yeah, I think men are generally unprepared for emotional labor. I think in relationships and in parenting, like men, maybe it's especially men my age. Maybe it's older men. I tend to think it's all men, regardless of age or other factors. I think men are generally unprepared for emotional labor. And I think that has to do with gender roles and expectations and norms and things like that. People grow up with. And I think men are generally unprepared for the kinds and the amounts of emotional labor that they need to perform in order to sustain relationships, in order to nurture children. I think it's a very difficult struggle. And one of the things that it's clear to me is just and this goes back to like the children are relentless point. The emotional labor of parenting is constant. It's not something you do here and there. It's making sure that your child feels safe and supported and encouraged, and not just now, but all the time, in a way that the fact that you can't just kind of do it once and then it's done is, I think, something that men in particular are unprepared for and untrained in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've come to realize that it can feel like a chore for, at least in, my experiences with men, and I'll speak with my partner, how I know a lot of men like to be, I guess, fixers, and they like to feel like, oh, I can come in and fix the problem and be done with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've like checked that off my list of chores, and not in a bad way, in a caring, like, I care enough. I want to fix this for you, or, for us, or whatever it is. And that doesn't require a consistent kind of framework that you're referring to, right? Where with children, the emotional labor and in relationships, right? It is constant. And now I'm a boy mom, of a 5-month-old. And so I'm faced with a lot of my own ethical questions when it comes to raising a boy who will turn into, hopefully, an emotionally intelligent man. But I don't know what I'm doing, right? And I read books, and I'm hoping that I know, how to raise him in a way that's conducive to this. And I have, theories on what maybe has been happening in generations past. And I have a thought that I guess want to unpack with you, perhaps. Do you think that reducing men in traditional sense in the past to just being providers, and perhaps only providers, has left them feeling either incompetent or that their value is reduced to that. And so, reducing anyone to sort of a commodity is a little bit dehumanizing, right? So is there maybe some aspect of this that you've thought about that you think has anything to do with how men have, been treated?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been thinking about is, and it has to do with the kind of return of this concern with masculinity. I think more so than when I was, say, like a teenager in my 20s, which, dates me a little bit. But I feel like it wasn't so incumbent upon people to demonstrate their masculinity, to be performative about masculinity in the way that I think, at least from what I see, in online culture and students or things like that, that there's much more of a concern about that now than when I was younger. Or maybe just I'm a weirdo and I hung around with the kind of people who weren't concerned with how masculine or feminine they were. And I think one of the issues is we hold up these sort of norms or ideals and we say, these are the roles you're supposed to perform and these are the sort of jobs you're supposed to perform and the needs you're supposed to satisfy. And we kind of expect people to measure themselves by those norms and those standards and fit into them. So we're creating a type and we're asking people to identify with that type. And I think there are lots of ways in which people can do that, but it also kind of distorts who a person is. I want my daughter to be the person that she is, not the ideal type of anything. And if she's different than women are supposed to be, or if somebody's different than men are supposed to be, good. Maybe they have different strengths or different abilities or different perspectives on things that are actually advantageous. And I think our tendency to use these norms as standards and measure ourselves by them, I don't know, sometimes it just seems like there's a stronger demand that people fit themselves into these molds than at other times. And sometimes the difference from the norm or the standard or the model version of something is valued. And then sometimes people start, really insisting on the standard issue, man or woman or something like that. Which is it's a loaded concept. These standards and norms and models are never neutral. They're always, there are racial dimensions to them, there are class dimensions to them. There are even geopolitical elements of these norms and standards. And I think academics have done a lot of research and they've studied these things. Certainly other people more so than me, but I think the tendency now is to sort of demand that people perform these roles to the greatest possible extent, even in very extreme ways, right? So I'll leave the sort of extremes of online culture and gender performativity online to people's imaginations, but that's something that really worries me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's very layered, as you say. I think we could probably unpack all the layers in a very extensive conversation. But I think the permissiveness to let children be who they are is so important because by not doing that, right, we're boxing them in, whether we are intentionally doing that or not. And so, not allowing a child, a boy or a girl, to express themselves freely in who they authentically are is harmful, regardless of, what you think as a parent you're doing it for. And so, that just goes to say, yes, it's a lot harder once you become a parent, but I think you have to go into parenting knowing that you are signing up to unconditionally love and support a little person that you cannot control who they are at the end of the day, right? Then there's a lot we can do to shape them in all of these, value systems that we hope to kind of instill in them. But yeah, parenting requires daily decision making, and that's part of the constant mental and visible load that we moms talk about so much. I know dads feel it too. But as the main caretakers, it just feels sometimes overwhelming because it's just constant and you don't always know if you're doing it right, or what am I missing, and so, yeah, there's balancing a lot of needs, societal expectations, unique to each child because each child is different. And so that's ethically complicated, I think. But what would you say is the most overlooked ethical dilemma facing parents today?
So I think I have two answers to that. One of them, I think, is something that you were talking about just a minute ago. I think that when you are a parent, your responsibility is to love your child for who they are and to really support them. I think I think of being a parent as kind of being a guardian, and being a guardian of your child in your child's best interests. You are looking after the best interests of your child. You are not reproducing a smaller, younger version of yourself. Nor are you producing an ideal product, right? So the goal of parenting is not to have your child turn out the best a child can possibly turn out. It's for them to be the people that they are, and to have the safety and the support and the love to become that person, and to know that person is, valued and supported by their family, by their parents. I may be stepping into something by using this phrase, but I think when the parents' rights movement or people talking about parental rights talk about children, sometimes they end up sounding like their children are their property. And I think that the difference between having a child who is a person and having something that is yours and your property, I think the difference between those two things is really an important issue that parents have to face, and they have to accept that their children are people, not property. They are their own people, and it's your job to take care of them. So you take care of them, not for yourself. And that means sometimes, right, putting your own values and your own beliefs on hold, right? You may have a certain set of beliefs or a certain set of values, and, you have to kind of let that go to be the parent that your child needs. I think that's a hard,
it's a hard pill to swallow for some.
Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow for some parents. For everybody, really, to different degrees. But I think that's one answer I'd give. I think also the challenge of like misinformation is a really important aspect of parenting, and I think that's one of the biggest difficulties that parents face right now. Is just there's so much information out there. So much of it is trying to just get your attention, or it's trying to monetize attention, or it's trying to skew your attention and your money and your votes in certain directions, rather than doing what's best for kids or for families. And I think people don't know who to trust anymore because there's so much misinformation out there. And there's a sort of cynicism that kind of anything goes, or even like nihilism. There's no truth. There's no right or wrong. You do you. So I think that, to me, that would be one of the things I would focus on. I think misinformation is a really serious issue for parents now.
Mm. What is one value, if you had to pick one, but you can pick more than one, that you hope your child will carry with them into adulthood?
I hope my daughter loves truth. I'm a philosophy professor. I'm maybe like naive or overly earnest in caring about truth to the extent that I do. But I think a concern for truth will have moral and ethical implications, because I think there's a truth about right and wrong. And if you care about truth, you will care about the truth about right and wrong. And, I also think that caring about truth can help you make hard choices. Sometimes this is where I show the degree to which I'm a Kantian. Sometimes caring about truth means choosing what's right rather than what makes you happy. And I think that has its own rewards, that has its own benefits. You're not doing it because of the benefits. You're doing it because it's true. It's actually true that it's the right thing. And I think being able to put something above your own happiness and your own gratification is really important. And I think that's, we live in a kind of consumer culture that's all about instant gratification. And caring about truth and caring about what's right and being able to choose something because it's right, because it's true. That's something that I hope my daughter can do. And I hope that people continue to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great one that I will remember as I've carried your whole ethics class with me all of these years later. So I think the work you're doing, not only obviously as a parent, but as a professor, it's impactful and it's important and it makes a difference. So, I mean, thank you for your time and everything you do. And before we wrap up, I'd just like to offer you some space to share anything you're working on, whether it's a publication, talks, anything.
I'm working on a bunch of stuff, but it's all very nerdy and very academic. And I don't know what audience would be interested in it, which is the curse of academic scholarship. You spend all this time and all this effort on things that a very small number of people will ever read or be interested in.
Well, I'm interested, so I want to hear it.
Thank you. So I'm working on a book. I'm working on a book on the relationship between aesthetics and logic in 18th century Germany. That's a very nerdy book. It's also very long, but I'm almost done with it. I've been working on that for almost 10 years.
Was that the fellowship you were doing in Frankfurt when you didn't teach my senior capstone because you were away?
Yeah, exactly. So
well,
I went to
I remember
Frankfurt
it.
and I started this book, and then my daughter was born and COVID hit, and it took me longer to finish than I thought it would. So life intervenes, but
that happens.
You get there anyway in the end over time. So I'm working on that. I'm going to Houston in a couple of weeks to give a few talks there at the University of Houston, and then to the Houston Early Modern Philosophy Circle, which is also a very nerdy group, but something I'm very happy to participate in. And I'm the chair of the philosophy department at St. Mary's. I'm teaching a course on the philosophy of science right now, which is a new course for me. I'll teach ethics courses in the spring, which is always a pleasure. And I will be enjoying the success of my students and seeing all the good work they've gone on to do, like you, Katia. So
thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, to see how well you're doing.
Thank you. Likewise. And hopefully Rebecca and Kalina can meet, because I know that they are two peas in a pod.
Yeah, I think so. There will be an explosion of pink everywhere.
Yes. Pink and fashion. Thank you, Colin. It's so weird to call you that. Thank you so much, Colin.
Good to see you, Katia.
You too. Thank you for listening to the Unapparent podcast, produced by Studio Dama and hosted by me, Katia Lindor. If you like what you heard, subscribe or follow us on social media and tune in as we share deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting.